Facts Verse presents. Groom left in tears after his wife did this at the altar. Making bold decisions and accepting the consequences therein takes courage. To not settle for compromises no matter what the price, it takes courage, and to stand your ground to protect and uphold what you believe, that takes courage as well. And courage is what Jenny showed when she rejected Fred, her husband-to-be, on the very day of their wedding, right up at the altar. However, Jenny did not only reject Fred, she did a lot more. Often the word itself, wedding, is enough to give people concerned, the groom and the bride-to-be that is, butterflies in the stomach. It is a commitment for life. Once we enter into marriage, we're supposed to do it knowing that, come rain or shine, we're going to stand by our spouse and support each other, and for the rest of our lives. It's no easy call, and as such, it is normal that all sorts of doubts will start creeping into our minds. And the same happened to Jenny. She loved Fred with all of her heart, and there was not a shred of doubt in her mind that Fred loved her the same. They'd been in a relationship for 6 years, and they knew each other inside out. Or so Jenny thought. For all of that, however, she couldn't rid herself of a few nagging doubts. Now, it's all right that they love each other now, but what would happen if their love wore out? Would there still be trust and mutual respect enough to carry on with the relationship in an agreeable and pleasant manner? All the same, they'd made the decision, and it was time to move on with it. It was time to drive away all those doubts and negative emotions. And being the resolute person she was, Jenny did exactly that. She was going to marry the man she loved, and Fred, the man in question, loved her just as much, if not more. They were going to enter a bright and happy chapter of their lives, and their future could take care of itself. So, Jenny, once she'd made up her mind, dove into the wedding preparations with all the zeal she could muster. Meticulous and exacting as she was, she saw to every detail. This was going to be the happiest day in her life, and she wanted everybody to join in and share in their happiness. However, to Fred, she made a somewhat strange request, and it was that they were not to meet for a few days before the wedding. No more rendezvous, no calls, no even messages. And as devoted as he was to Jenny, Fred agreed with the suggestion, with a little bit of protest. In short, Jenny wanted to play it by the book. She wanted the marriage to be a grand and happy occasion, and yet little did she know at this time that it was she who would be forced to perform the most dreadful task right at the altar. The sun shone brightly through the curtains as Jenny woke up on the morning of her big day. Not a single dark thought in her mind. She eagerly anticipated the day and the happenings that were about to unfold. Soon enough, she was joined by her friends at a glitzy hotel room located close to the wedding venue. It was sort of a last-moment all-girls bachelor party. There was the usual girl talk, the jokes, innocent teasing, and so forth. However, Jenny's friends, who were already married, did chip in with a few tips and shared their experiences, all with a view to keep her spirits high. And Jenny, too, was all aglow. She was already looking forward to her honeymoon, the fun the newly married couple would have together, and so on. And yet, in an hour or so, all her healthy and girlish dreams would be shattered. Before that happened, once again Jenny was visited, perhaps due to an excess of happiness, by those nagging doubts that had already tormented her enough during those early stages. Or perhaps they were triggered by some little teasing words from a friend. Even words said in jest can cut us deep sometimes. Either way, the clouds were back. Is she, after all, making the right decision to marry Fred? What if the marriage didn't work out? Jenny was still trying to keep up a cheerful facade. However, the uneasiness she felt underneath wouldn't escape the notice of her best friend Alexa. Jenny and Alexa had been childhood friends, so it was easy for the latter to spot the change in mood in her best friend. So Alexa took Jenny to a corner and tried to convince her the best she could. But Jenny, by nature, was the adamant type. Once something took hold of her, it was anything but easy to convince her otherwise. Seeing no other recourse, Alexa got hold of Jenny's phone and was at least able to convince her to give a call to Fred. Although unwilling at first because it would break her own rules, Jenny concurred and called him. As expected, Fred was surprised by the call. Knowing Jenny, he knew that his bride-to-be would not be one to break a vow unless something serious had happened. And listening to Jenny, he understood it was indeed serious. Jenny didn't hide anything from Fred. She bared her heart and discussed frankly with Fred all that was in her mind. Fortunately, Fred was able to drill in how much he loved Jenny, going as far as to mention that his life would be in tatters if Jenny was to call off the marriage. And Jenny believed him. Colors returned to her cheeks again, and watching the proceedings, Alexa was more than relieved as well. She felt inwardly happy for her friend. However, the calm that prevailed was to be short-lived. As the friends were helping her put on her wedding dress and adding the final touches, Jenny's phone rang. The message was from an unknown number. Who could it possibly be? Busy as she was, for a moment Jenny thought she would just ignore the call, not recognizing the number. Curiosity, however, got the better of her, and she retired to the washroom to read the message. Barely moments later, her world fell into pieces. Everything was whirling around her, and for an instant Jenny thought that she would lose consciousness. However, the almost tempestuous rage that she felt helped her from swooning. She threw the phone away on the bathroom floor in agony, hate, disgust, rage. So what was in the message? Well, something that unmasked Fred for good. The sender was a woman, the very woman with whom Fred had been cheating on Jenny with for quite some time. If that wasn't all, screenshots of the messages that Fred had sent to the woman were so raunchy they could be right out of a dirty porn film. The message ended with a question from the said woman saying, "I wouldn't marry this guy, would you?" The question, however, was redundant. At that moment, Jenny felt she could kill the guy, let alone marry him. After the impact of this initial shock subsided to some degree, Jenny made up her mind. She pulled herself together, straightened out her dress, and picked up the cracked but still working phone, calmly and quietly walked out of the bathroom. This time, however, there was no charade, no facade of cheerfulness. Everyone around could sense something was wrong, but Jenny wouldn't divulge a word. It wasn't time yet, and there was poor Alexa thinking another of her mood swings. While for all of her calm exterior, needless to mention, Jenny was fuming on the inside. On more than one occasion she felt like breaking into tears, but she controlled herself every single time, reasoning with herself that it would be in fact despicable of her to shed even a single tear for a man such as that. The man that she was set to tie the knot with that very day, the man who was keeping up an affair with another woman behind her back, an affair that had lasted for months. The last of the screenshots the woman sent was only from a few days ago. In short, the man who made a fool and a joke of Jenny. And all those smutty messages. But now Jenny was convinced what she had to do. It was time for payback, for the joke to be reversed. She wouldn't call off the wedding, no, that would be too small of a punishment for a depraved and despicable scoundrel such as Fred. In fact, that would hardly be any punishment at all. Perhaps she would only be laughed at behind her back again, and others they would only pity her, albeit in the guise of sympathy. No, that wouldn't do. Jenny had other plans. She refused to play the part of the victim. The hour came. During a talk with Daniel Connolly, Jenny revealed how sad and crestfallen she had felt walking down the aisle side by side with the man who she now knew was an appalling skunk. The church was full. Friends and relatives from near and far had come and were already anticipating this joyful wedding ceremony that was to begin at any moment. And yet, for all the despair that she felt inside, Jenny related that many told her afterwards that she really did look radiant standing on the altar, and that they wouldn't guess about the horror drama that was about to unfold in just a few moments. Just as she was about to reveal to the congregation what a snake in the grass her fiancé had been, Jenny felt a little hesitant. After all, Fred was still the man that she had loved with all her heart. But then she had to only remember what a fool she had been made of by this very man, possibly during all 6 of their years together, and her resolution returned. And then a most fantastic thing began to unfold right at the altar. Instead of getting to hear the customary marriage vows and oaths being repeated by the soon-to-be-married couple, the congregation, to its utter dismay, was soon listening to all those smutty messages that Fred had sent to the other woman. Often the language used was so outrageous that it would otherwise be deemed heretical to mouth them in God's house. But Jenny was reading aloud, and there was no stopping her. Not that anybody tried. Since what was decidedly more scandalous than the dirty language was the way the man so ruthlessly, shamelessly deceived a woman who had loved him wholeheartedly and who was prepared to go any length for him as long as she could believe that her love was reciprocated. Once she got started, Jenny went whole hog, holding back nothing. And once she was finished, she looked at Fred's face. It had blanched. All colors had deserted that face. And chances are no groom had ever felt so lonely as Fred did at that moment. He almost looked on the brink of tears. Wife? Not quite, but Fred must have taken that for granted by that time. For a moment he looked at a loss about what to do. The next instant, he was gone with his best man following closely behind, leaving his family as well as all the other present in a veritable state of shock. Yes, Jenny's world had collapsed for the time being, but standing there, alone at the altar, she suddenly felt a rush of joy streaming through her. Difficult as it was, she had done the right thing. She had stood up for herself. And in her happiness, she invited everyone willing to join in an honest, genuine celebration. There was a note of unmistakable sincerity in her voice, and few could summon the heart to refuse her generous invitation. And indeed, there was a joyful party afterwards, leaving behind all the gloominess of a called-off marriage, a thing of the past already. As soon as her story became public knowledge, there were voices of support for Jenny from all quarters. Not a few lauded her courage and sincerity. Of course, not everything would be forgotten all that soon. The scar would take time to heal. But the knowledge that one was bold, sincere, and had the courage to stick to her convictions is sure to take her far. In fact, one could almost say that Fred, albeit in his devious and treacherous way, has actually helped Jenny become a better and stronger person. Jenny has set an example. Devastating though her experience was, she has taught everybody a valuable lesson. And it's up to us to follow in the footsteps of individuals like her, to stand up for our rights, to make this beloved world of ours a better place to live. Subscribe for more.